Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and we start tonight with impeachment. A lot of developments, but understandably a lot of questions about what is going on. Is this a formal impeachment inquiry? Why isn't the House voting on impeachment? What is next? A lot of moving parts, and I understand that. What we're going to attempt to do tonight is to clarify. Also, we're going to show you the key players and also tell you what they are saying to Congress and who will testify next. And we'll hear from two former Watergate prosecutors who say that Donald Trump deserves to be impeached. But we will kick things off with the Speaker of the House attempting to answer some of those questions.
At this time, we will not be having a vote, and I'm very pleased with the thoughtfulness of our caucus. We're not here to call bluffs. We're here to find the truth, to uphold the Constitution of the United States. This is not a game for us. This is deadly serious.
Nancy Pelosi refusing to accommodate the president and his calls for a vote before the investigation is even completed. That will satisfy nervous Democrats in swing districts who weren't in a rush for a floor vote. Meantime, President Trump continuing to rail about the process and the hearings that are ramping up this week.
I don't even know these people. And for the most part, people like that at testify, I don't even know who they are. I never even heard of some of them, most of them.
He claims he doesn't know their names, but I bet he's aware of what they've been saying during those closed-door impeachment hearings. Now, in a minute, we're going to show you parts of their testimony, but first, a look at the calendar. These hearings kicked off a couple weeks ago with former U.S. Special Envoy to Ukraine, Kurt Volker. Then, last Friday, former Ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, she testified. And on Monday, it was Fiona Hill's turn. She, former top Trump advisor on Russia. Yesterday, George Kent spoke to Congress. He, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Europe. Today, it was Michael McKinley's turn. He went before Congress. He, former senior advisor to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Well, tomorrow, European Union Ambassador Gordon Sondland, he will get his turn. And then on Friday, the week, we'll wrap up with Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense Laura Cooper. Now, it's time for all the gory details, and let's start off with Mr. Volker. Volker reportedly told Rudy Giuliani that the information that he got from Ukrainian politicians about Joe Biden was not trustworthy. That would mean that the president's personal attorney was giving Trump unreliable information knowingly, and the president was running with it. Then there's Marie Yovanovitch. Her opening statement was searing. Now, I'm going to read a portion of it for you now. Quote, I have served this nation honorably for more than 30 years. Throughout that time, I, like my colleagues at the State Department, have always believed that we enjoyed a sacred trust with our government. We repeatedly uproot our families, and we frequently put ourselves in harm's way to serve this nation. She went on. Today, we see the State Department attacked and hollowed out from within. We need to rebuild diplomacy as the first resort to advance America's interests and the front line of America's defense. I fear that not doing so will harm our nation's interest, perhaps irreparably. The harm will come when private interests circumvent professional diplomats for their own gain, not the public good. The harm will come when bad actors in countries beyond Ukraine see how easy it is to use fiction and innuendo to manipulate our system. By the way, Yovanovitch, she was shown the door soon after the Ukraine scandal broke. And on Monday, former Trump advisor on Russia, Fiona Hill, she dropped some bombshells about, once again, Rudy Giuliani. Hill reportedly saying that former National Security Advisor John Bolton had serious concerns about Rudy, calling him a, quote, hand grenade who's going to blow everybody up. Hill also saying Bolton told her to tell the National Security Council's chief lawyer about the rogue foreign policy being run by Giuliani. Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, and the U.S. Ambassador to the European Union, Gordon Sondland. Hill reportedly saying Bolton didn't want to be part of, and I'm quoting here, whatever drug deal they are cooking up. By the way, Sondland, scheduled to testify tomorrow, it will also be behind closed doors, just like the rest of these depositions have been. And he's right in the middle of the scandal. Sondland, a big Trump donor who became the U.S. Ambassador to the EU, and Sondland apparently serving as point person between Trump and the Rudy Giuliani-led efforts to pressure Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden and his son Hunter. And there are text messages between Sondland and other officials that could be particularly damaging to the president. And yesterday, it was George Kent's turn. He is Trump's Deputy Assistant Secretary of State in charge of Ukraine policy. Kent spoke with the House Intelligence Committee, again behind closed doors, reports saying he backed up the testimony of Fiona Hill, and he also vouched for the whistleblower complaint that brought the scandal to light. These hearings, they have done one thing very well. They've corroborated time and time again the whistleblower complaint that started the whole Ukraine scandal. And that's what started the impeachment inquiry. Well, my first guest tonight, he one of 17 Watergate prosecutors who penned a piece in the Washington Post saying Trump should be impeached. The piece, it spells out 3 articles of impeachment against President Nixon, saying they also apply to Trump. They are 1 for obstruction, 1 for abuse of power, and also 1 for contempt of Congress. Now, I'm going to quote from that piece in the Post. In our considered view, the same 3 articles of impeachment could be specified against Trump, as he has demonstrated serious and persistent abuses of power that, in our view, satisfy the constitutional standard of high crimes and misdemeanors. And joining us tonight is Nick Akerman. He's former Watergate prosecutor and also former assistant U.S. attorney at the Southern District of New York. Nick, thanks for bearing with me for that long, but I think necessary overview to how we've gotten to where we are right now with so many moving parts and moving players. Put your prosecutor's hat on for a second. Which testimony have we heard and that we are pending to hear from that you think might not just corroborate and be connective tissue, but also be expository of something that was a coherent plan here that was basically an impeachable offense?
I think it's the totality of all of this evidence and testimony that you just mentioned. The key piece being the transcript that was released by the White House of that July tape, which clearly shows Donald Trump asking the Ukrainian president for a favor to dig up dirt on Joe Biden and holding back aid and holding back a visit to the White House. All of this other testimony that you mentioned cumulatively basically sinks Donald Trump. These people are all people who have no axe to grind. They're people with firsthand knowledge. Nobody can claim that they're just reciting hearsay and what other people told them. They were there. They were in the room with Donald Trump. They heard this conversation. They know the other facts that occurred before the July call. This was not a shot in the dark.
As they say, Nick, you're preaching to the converted, but you need 20 Republican senators if it gets to the trial phase here to agree with the 47 sitting Democrats to reach that 2/3 threshold. And I haven't seen 20 voices who've remotely said that they've gotten there, even some with competitive seats come next fall. They're even on the hedge. To that end, how about other names? Bolton, for example, clearly didn't leave on good terms, and there doesn't seem to have a lot of leverage the White House has over him, let alone privilege to not let him talk. Give me some names that I haven't said yet that could come before not just closed doors, but maybe in front of the cameras if this thing goes to trial, that will be the John Dean in effect this time around.
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of John Deans. I mean, don't forget, you've got people who are career civil servants that had to be part of listening to what was going on. Donald Trump doesn't talk Ukrainian. He doesn't speak Russian. There are people there that had to be there to listen to this. So you've got people who are career civil servants, like Fiona Hill, like the former ambassador to Ukraine, all of whom are extremely smart, incredibly and very credible witnesses. And you're going to find other people whose names we don't even know. I mean, John Bolton is clearly somebody who I don't think is going to want to go in and lie for Donald Trump. Now, if you're looking to get 20 Republican senators, all I can tell you is this is the same thing that happened during the Watergate matter. The Senate was pretty much the same way until that smoking gun tape came out. And I think what we have here is, once you put together this evidence, I think you're going to have a lot of senators having a hard time justifying that. And the stronger this evidence is, the more testimony there is, the more people that come forward, it is really going to put these Republican senators on the spot.
One of the things you guys ran into in Watergate was the premise that the executive branch was basically beyond reproach, where you couldn't get your hands on certain things. Did the courts definitively, Nick, say, no. As we said with the tapes here, there's no privilege as it relates to this. To that end, Are they going to get their hands on everything that's on that private server? Not the redacted or shortened version of the transcript, but the whole conversation as we understand it, at least the whistleblower alleged, and everything he said seems to have been borne out. There's other tapes there too, apparently conversations with Putin, the royal Saudi family, etc. Are we going to hear all that stuff?
I'm not sure if we are, because it's going to take time. I mean, I'm sure the White House is going to fight that. There's going to be a court battle. I don't think the House of Representatives wants to take the time to do that, nor do they need the time to do that. They've already got the transcript of the conversation, which is basically a smoking gun. I mean, that in itself is pretty damning. But then when you put together all of this firsthand testimony that they're now in the process of gathering, when you put together the text messages and other documents that they are likely to come up with from other people, I don't think they need to go that far. I mean, I think they're looking to put this to bed pretty much by the end of the year and get it to the Senate. And the key is, just like any good prosecutor, putting together a good prosecutable case that you can put before a jury, that a jury will have no choice. In this case, it's the U.S. Senate and 2/3 of the U.S. Senate to basically remove Donald Trump from office.
The parallels between then and now, to me, the abuse of power, which has been the biggest commonality that we've seen throughout these 3 years, and this certain interpretation by this president that the executive branch basically might as well be a king. I think that's a conveyable argument to the American public, and while I'm sure they'll pursue more than one article of impeachment if they go down that road, wouldn't you agree that that's the one that's the most consumable and the most trackable one, even for the senators?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is Watergate on steroids. I mean, this is such an abuse of power. It is so flagrant. I mean, this is what caused this Republican senators in Watergate to, take the trip up to the White House and to basically tell Richard Nixon it's all over. It was the tape where Nixon instructed his aides to call the CIA, to have the CIA director direct the FBI to stop their investigation into the break-in at the Watergate complex. I mean, this is pretty much where I think we're going to wind up at the end, that any reasonable person looking at this evidence, assuming that they put it all together, which it appears that they're doing right now, and they're putting together a pretty solid case that is not just a one-shot deal, but goes over an entire period of time that shows a pattern of abuse of power, of trying to use the power of the presidency to basically go after a political rival for personal reasons, to assist him in the 2020 election.
Nick, great stuff. Unfortunately, it's about an hour's more worth that we could get into and just be getting started, but nonetheless, very helpful tonight. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, now when we come back, another former Watergate prosecutor, he'll join us. He also says Trump deserves impeachment. He also worked in the Treasury Department, so we're going to discuss all the financial scandals involving the president, and also how this process would all work.